Hello everyone, welcome back to Cooking with Countryside. My name is Melissa and today we're going to be making a quinoa arugula salad. So there's kind of been a trend where all the health food restaurants, you can go and buy a bowl. So whether it be a lettuce bowl or a rice bowl or both. So this is kind of something that you can make at home to mimic what you might see in a restaurant like that. So what we're going to need is arugula, summer squash, leeks, carrots, and a peach. And then the things you'll need that you cannot get at the market are quinoa, balsamic vinegar, and olive oil. So, to get started, you need to first cook the quinoa, and I have already started that process, but pretty much you just need a small pot. You take the dry quinoa and first you need to rinse it off. So in a little mesh, I don't know what it's called, mesh rinser, you can rinse it off, and then it tells you right on the package how much water to add and what the ratio is. So you bring it to a boil, and then once it starts boiling, you bring it down to a simmer, let it simmer 15 minutes, and then let it sit on the stove for about 5 minutes. And then the final step is to fluff it with a fork. But while your quinoa is cooking, you can cut up the rest of your vegetables and things. But by starting that process first, you can get ahead on things. There's an option to cook a hard-boiled egg and add a hard-boiled egg to this. So if you would like to do that, this would be the time when you're cooking your quinoa to also cook your hard-boiled egg. So the next step would be to cut your arugula into bite-sized pieces and wash it, and sometimes there is a little bit of a harder stem, so if you don't want that in your bowl, you can just break that off and set it to the side. So I'm using arugula for this, but pretty much this formula, you can swap out your green of choice, swap out your grain of choice, and swap out your toppings. The reason I chose arugula was just because it has a really nice flavor, and it's not something that I necessarily always buy at the market, so I wanted to try something different. And then all the toppings that I'm using are just because that's what's in season right now and that's what's at the market. But you can always swap out as needed. So we're going to use a cup of greens. So let's see how much that is. That's about right. And then this recipe makes 1 bowl, just an FYI. So I'm just going to rinse these off, and then these are going to be the first ingredient that actually goes in our bowl. Okay, so we have a bed of arugula on the bottom. What we're going to add next to the bowl is our cooked quinoa. So we're going to add that right on top. And the serving size for quinoa is 1/4 cup of the dry grain. So it's going to make more than 1/4 cup once it's cooked. But you may need to adjust if you're cooking for more people. Okay, so the next step is to add all your toppings. So one topping we're going to add is carrots, and I went ahead and shredded them ahead of time. So again, there's no real measurements for this. On the recipe card, I'll give you some examples of what you could add, but just kind of however much you want. And it's all going to benefit you in the long run. So the next thing we're going to add are leeks. I'm going to thinly slice the white end. I'm not going to put any of the green in this because we are eating it raw, and the green is a little more fibrous, so it's going to be harder to eat raw. But the white part here is going to taste just fine. So I'm thinly slicing these, and then I'm going to chop them into even smaller pieces, and this is going to add almost like an oniony flavor, but a little more mild to your bowl. And there's no right or wrong way to cut this, no right or wrong size. So the final ingredient of the actual bowl itself is going to be a summer squash. So we're gonna eat this raw, so you probably want to chop it into small pieces. If you have a grater, that would work amazing here. So it'd be like shredded squash. If not, you can either dice it by hand or use a food processor. And I actually just bought this little one. It's a handheld food processor, so I'm gonna use that to just chop these into small little pieces. Kind of see that? So now we just have little small pieces. I'm not gonna add quite the whole thing that I cut. So then at this point, if you had anything else that you would like to add it to your bowl. And then the last step will be to make the dressing and put it on top. So now we're gonna make the peach balsamic dressing to put on top. So I have a peach here. I'm just gonna use a quarter of this peach because it's just gonna be for myself. So I'm just gonna cut off a quarter. I'm gonna cut off the red part on the inside just for aesthetics, but I'm going to leave on the skin because your peach is gonna get pretty much pureed or chopped super small anyway, so the skin's just gonna add a little extra fiber for you. So I'm just gonna cut this in half and I'm gonna add it to my food processor, or you could use a blender here as well. Or if you don't have either of those, you could just mash the peach with a fork or cut it real small with a knife and mix it in, and your dressing will be a little bit chunkier, but it'll still taste great. So the only other ingredients are balsamic vinegar, which we're going to use 1 teaspoon, and olive oil or your oil of choice, which we're going to use 2 tablespoons. And then we're just gonna mix it up. See how that's going. I'm gonna stir it around. I'm gonna give it one more mix. So obviously if you're using a food processor, it may not get as smooth as if you were using a blender. But of course, if you have a nicer food processor, you'll get it a little bit more creamy. So my dressing is done. I'm just gonna drizzle that on top, and that's all. So if you'd like to learn how to make this bowl from ingredients that you find fresh from local farms here in Ohio, visit countrysidefoodandfarms.org. Thank you.